Hey everyone, it's the Pocket Moggers here. How you doing today? Hope things are going well. I've got a video here that I wanted to run by y'all real quick. It's just a for fun pitch to the audience sort of thing. This video in particular will be about the American comic book industry and specifically the big two, which are DC and Marvel, in said industry. They've been doing a whole bunch of crossovers recently, and I've really enjoyed many of them. I really dug all of the Superman Spider-Man stories. I thought they were pretty darn cool. The second issue of Batman Deadpool I liked. The Wonder Woman Captain America story was pretty good. I'm hoping we see more and more and more of this stuff because it's great. But one of the crossovers that was mentioned was, or featured rather, not mentioned, was a little more obscure. Maybe not everybody who's into comics knows what was going on in that or even heard about this. So I'm going to give you a brief little introduction to what was teased, or rather, well, yeah, more teased, never overtly stated, in this particular comic and how it fed into the idea that I'm going to pitch to you guys today. So, with that out of the way, the idea that I'm pitching to you, just for fun, it's Storm of the New Gods. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, in a Marvel comic called G.O.D.S, Storm, who has been powered up recently, was taken to what appears to be the Source Wall, and therefore was put inside the DC universe, multiverse, really, and just kind of got to explore a little bit of that. And that concept really got me thinking because Storm and her roots as a goddess in her home country and just her power set in general really fits with the fourth world, with these like um, you know, pre-Christian religions and their deities. There's a lot of that stuff. I don't really like the term pagan so much, so I don't use that. And it's not necessarily because I find the term pagan offensive as much as the connotation around it. It, I just want to be fair to early religions as I am to the living ones, right? And just say, hey, people believe that stuff too, right? We should be respectful to that stuff as well. So those kinds of religions were a big source of inspiration, along with, of course, the Bible itself, for Jack Kirby's Fourth World. And Storm just really fits in well with all of that stuff. So it got my brain thinking about some basic ideas. I mean, this is a super shallow proof of concept here. I'm not going to dive in too deep. I don't want to take an hour and a half talking about this. I just want to introduce you guys to the concept. I've got one arc where I've got a little more of it fleshed out, and then I have two rough ideas I'm going to talk about at the end. But just a fun storytelling exercise that I got into that I thought was a good idea. I know that a lot of people are fans of Storm, rightfully so. She is my favorite leader of the X-Men and one of my favorite Marvel characters, period. Her and her ex-husband T'Challa. So I just I really wanted to give her a little bit of a spotlight over in the DC universe and do some fun stuff with two parts of the bigger universes that I really like. And with that, I'm going to stop rambling on and get to the story. So yeah, this is very simple, right? The new gods are leaderless, Highfather and family poisoned, only Orion remains. Jeez. Um, for those who are unaware, the uninitiated, the new gods are the good and evil forces of what is called the Fourth World. Jack Kirby, who was huge for both Marvel and DC, developed it. It's some of his best work. If you haven't read The Fourth World, I 100% recommend it to you. It's strange, but it's good. Anyway, with that being said, yeah, High Father is the archetypal Sky Father deity that, if you have been through religious studies courses, excuse me, I'm so sorry, guys. You have seen this thing a million billion times. You know this figure. If you haven't, Zeus. Indra, heck, our American, I'm assuming you're American, my apologies. Let me say, the American depiction of God as an old man who sits up in the sky and judges you comes from Skyfather here. Well, the Skyfather figure, which is interpreted in the comic as High Father here. Let's say it that way. That's better. So, High Father is I'm not going to call him unassailably good. You know what I mean? He has his flaws, but overall he is attempting to keep the universe safe from the bad new gods who are led by Darkseid. And Darkseid, of course, has parallels with figures like Satan and Hades and things like that. And even then, more so Satan. Hades wasn't bad. Satan is bad. A couple of other deities. It's so many other religions out there. The guardians of hell are heavenly appointed, right? So it's somewhat tough for me to find a direct parallel besides Satan with Darkseid. But anybody who's a fan of DC Comics knows Darkseid is worse. Darkseid goes down to hell to bother the devil, right? So Darkseid is just bad news. Darkseid has now attempted to shift the universal scale in favor of evil. If you're a fan of the Final Fantasy games, excuse me, did a little stuttering there. I don't know what's going on. Think of Final Fantasy 3, where the villain, what was his name? The guy with the staff. It's like Zandy? I don't know, something like that. Tries to freeze time so that he can tip the universe in the favor of darkness and live forever in the abyss. Because he was basically, real quick for those who don't know what I'm talking about, he was one of 3 students of the greatest, wisest, most powerful figure, and he was given a mortal life from this figure to help him better appreciate all of those around him and what they do for him. And he instead turned on everybody and attempted to destroy the world, use the forces of evil and darkness to drown out the light of the world, right? So, thematically, that's what Darkseid is doing. It's much more hellish and apocalyptic and nightmarish on Darkseid's end, because he's enslaving people, doing all that horrible, wicked stuff we ascribe to figures like Satan. But yes, he is attempting to make his move to forever alter the scale of the universe in the favor of evil. For the uninitiated, this is Orion. Orion is High Father's son. However, when he was born, he was given to Darkseid by High Father in exchange for Darkseid's son, a freakish monster named Calabac. so that the peace between the forces of good and evil would be assured. It was basically ransoms. And although Darkseid attempted his best to corrupt him, Orion was never able to be corrupted, but he also could never leave. On the other hand, Calabac was wicked from the beginning and voluntarily fled New Genesis and returned to Apocalypse. So basically, the new gods, the good new gods, got nothing out of it. From here on out in this video, I will be referring to the good new gods as the new gods, and the bad new gods as Apocalypse, or the forces of Apocalypse, just to make things easier. Anyway, Orion eventually was able to return home and become a hero. If you've ever seen Justice League Unlimited or Batman the Brave and the Bold, I'm sure he's in several of the later animated DC movies. I kind of found those a little too edgy. They didn't do much for me, but I'm sure he's in one of them. Yeah, you've probably seen him. If you haven't, here's your introduction. Basically, Storm escapes from the raptor creature. I don't want to get too much into that. That was pursuing her, and as she escapes, she is found by the forces of New Genesis, the new gods, who open up a boom tube. This is their signature technology. They can basically teleport anywhere, wherever they want. There's more to it than that, but for the sake of brevity, let's just call it teleportation. And they return to New Genesis when she is captured. She is exhausted at this point. I sincerely believe if she wasn't, they would not be able to hold her. Anyway, she is apprehended, and Orion accuses her of poisoning his family because she's the only new person around, right? He attacks her. They skirmish briefly. Storm is able to defeat him only because he is compromised, and as a skilled leader of the X-Men and other teams like it, she is able to take advantage of his grief despite the fact that she is also exhausted, right? So she is able to subdue him. He comes to a better understanding of her character once she does not kill him. And then, unfortunately, things go bad. Ororo is going to explain, for those who don't know, Storm's name is Ororo Monroe. She's going to explain what's going on with her, that she just showed up and she's been through all of this nonsense. And she's going to ask Orion to help her figure out what needs to happen. She offers to help him with his family in exchange. And Orion is willing to accept. But before Storm can finish talking about, let's figure out who did this, Darkseid will boom in. Darkseid will happily exclaim that he is the one who poisoned Highfather and his Orion's mother and other members of the family, and gloat and just really soak in Orion's sorrow. Darkseid hates Orion with a passion, for those who are unaware. It was prophesied at the beginning of time that Orion would kill Darkseid. And since that day, Darkseid has been terrified of him while also hating him, while also somewhat admiring his strength and his resolve. It's a very paradoxical relationship. Again, it's really fun. I wish... I wish those aspects were featured a little more in the depictions of the character that we get. But anyway, eventually, this does come to pass, and unfortunately, the murder of Darkseid is not as, well, let's just say it doesn't go the way that one would hope it would. But that's another story. Anyway, Darkseid actually came to demand information from Ororo, because Ororo is an outsider. The DC universe, as I mentioned earlier, is surrounded by this giant wall, quote unquote, called the Source Wall. And the Source Wall is essentially the corpses of gods, goddesses, and other such entities who have passed, who have faded from memory in the universe. And they're stuck on the outer wall of the DC universe. They're basically a giant energy wall that prevents anything from leaving the DC universe, or tries to prevent them. The Source Wall is powered by its own energy called Bleed. You will hear about that in DC sometimes. And basically, there are beings who are able to feed on the bleed. They are source vampires. That's another silly. Again, it's silly, but it's cool. Like, I'm talking about it, and it sounds goofy. It won't seem as silly when you actually read it. I promise. But yeah, the point is, the Source Wall is a big blockade, right? And Darkseid doesn't understand how Ororo got out of that. So he wants to know what her purpose is here. And basically says, hey, I don't like being surprised, right? I don't need this bull crap. What is going on here? Storm, Storm is a queen. Storm is a goddess. Storm is a leader. And more than that, Storm is just a proud person, right? So she's basically just like, nobody talks to me like that, right? I don't know who the hell you think you are, but nobody talks to me like that, right? So she won't tell him anything. The oncoming forces of New Genesis, Storm and Orion together, make Darkseid uneasy, especially since, although he didn't know the circumstances of it, his spies witnessed Storm defeating Orion, right? So she's clearly capable, and they're already mad. So Darkseid decides that it's not worth it. There's no point in doing this. He doesn't want the smoke, so he leaves. New Genesis is doomed anyway, as far as he's concerned. As soon as he leaves and Orion has calmed himself, for those who are unaware, Orion is famous for his temperament. He's a redhead. It's supposed to signify his hot-headedness. Orion calms down. He accepts Ororo's offer, realizing that she's clearly capable. The fact that Darkseid didn't phase her at all is surprising to him, right? So she's clearly a great ally to have. Ororo also wants to join Orion's operation to Apocalypse. He is going there to get someone for information about what has happened to Highfather and his mother, right? So he has an expedition going, and Orion, I'm thinking I'm going to do a funny thing where they both ask at the same time if she can go, right? Something along those lines. And they're going to head on out to Apocalypse. But Orion is perplexed by her just willingness to do this off the bat. This, especially since, right, she's exhausted, and they just fought each other. He was hostile towards her from the beginning, right? And Orion basically says, hey, if I were in your position, I wouldn't want to do this for this person. Why are you doing this for me? Right? And she tells him that although she can't see his face, he's got a mask on. Orion's famous for a helmet mask thing that he wears. She can tell that he's in need, that he's in despair, and that somebody needs to help him out, right? Um, she knows that he can't handle this mission emotionally compromised and exhausted, right? So she knows that she has to help. Right. She's also telling him, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm stuck here, right? Like I'm lost. I've lost my family, So you're not the only one who's in this kind of boat, right? Orion's moved by her answer and her resolve. And together, they finally decide, hey, let's make this happen. Let's get down there and figure out what's going on with the family, with the people of New Genesis. However, just as they're about to leave, Ororo asks Orion about his boom tubes. The range, how far can they go? How far has he pushed them? Orion answers that he can boom anywhere in the universe and some places outside, but doesn't really know the extent, hasn't tried outside of the source wall. Obviously, it would require a massive amount of energy to be able to transport one out of the source wall. So he doesn't know if such a thing is possible. Um, the reason she asks is because she wants to go home very briefly and get something. And she thinks that the boom tube can help her do that. So uh, she tells him that when she is fully rested and capable, she can generate the energy necessary to make the boom tube work. Right? So Orion and the best of the scientists in New Genesis come together to develop the most high-tech boom tube that has ever existed that runs off of Storm's energy. And I'm kind of picturing it like literally a belt that's strapped to her. I want her to put the X on it, of course, right? And just thinking about her being able to basically fly up into the sky and let herself just get struck by all of the energy, all of the storms up in the sky of New Genesis, right? Maybe even imply that Highfather's doing something beyond his conscious body to help empower her, like a storm just appears, right? Um, and she's able to use that energy to supercharge the boom tube to go back to Earth 616, at which point she goes to the Avengers Tower and approaches Thor, asking him for a favor that is not seen, but she needs something, right? We then see her and Thor summoning an even more powerful storm in the Marvel universe that she uses to charge the boom tube again so that she can leave. But as she's been going back and forth, the energy that is left behind from her warp has been picked up by Galactus. Galactus starts to feed on the energy coming from the source wall that is being left behind Storm as she's taking out, and he begins to become empowered. Again, these beings that feed the source wall, as you can see in this image here, they are gods in and of themselves, great beings. Darkseid himself has been seen imprisoned in it before. I don't know that he ever has been personally. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've read all the Fourth World stuff, but I don't think so. I think it's just visions of it, or maybe like in futures of the DC universe or something like that, right? But the point is, incredibly powerful beings that even Galactus himself would enjoy feasting on, right? And Galactus becomes addicted to this energy, and he starts to follow Ororo's warp signature out of the Marvel universe. So things are going really, really, really bad. I forgot to mention earlier that Granny Goodness was responsible for poisoning Highfather and the rest of the royal family, sans Orion. Granny Goodness is one of Darkseid's more capable people. She herself, maybe not physically, but she is sadistic, and even then, more so than your average person, I would imagine. She's cruel, she's ambitious, she's wicked, she's conniving, she's sociopathic. So she will always find ways to do things that other people wouldn't be willing to do. So she concocted the poison. She would therefore have an antidote just in case somebody else took the poison. The forces of of apocalypse, excuse me, are constantly scheming against one another. Granny herself would be paranoid that she would be poisoned by her own weapon once it was used on Highfather. So it's in all likelihood she has some sort of antidote, right? So they are going to take her and get the information out of her, maybe have her synthesize the antidote there. Although even then, you'd have to worry. Granny Goodness is wicked and petty. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on with me today. I got word diarrhea. Petty enough to lie and make the poison again and call it an antidote just to kill them faster, right? So it would be better to just have the antidote that she already made. But Darkseid has anticipated this, of course, and he has fortified Granny Goodness's section of Apocalypse far greater than the intel they had been relying on, which was old, would suggest would be capable, right? The parademons are far stronger. They're far more ruthless. They themselves don't care about their well-being because Darkseid no longer sees any need to keep some sort of peacekeeping force or keep up a pretext of being peaceful since Highfather is no longer around to stop him. So he has basically turned them into kamikaze monsters, right? And New Genesis simply can't handle it. Orion's doing his best. He has allies that are very powerful. They are also doing their best. My personal favorite are Big Barda and oh no, Mr. Miracle. Yeah. You'll see them in Fourth World stuff. But he's got people helping him. Anyway, it's not enough though. It just simply isn't. And to make matters worse, Darkseid has appeared in the battle himself. Those who know about Darkseid already know about the Omega Force and his Omega Beams, but Darkseid possesses an ability called the Omega Beams. They are eye lasers. Your classic Superman, Dragon Ball Z eye lasers, but they can move in different directions. He can control them from where he is standing, and he can control them independently. So one can go to the left and one can go to the right, one can go up, one can go down. You get the point. Normal mortals are obliterated by it instantly. Hyper-powerful beings are exposed to intense pain. It usually just critically injures Superman. Doesn't kill him outright. Darkseid once faced Doomsday and used them on him to kill him, only for Doomsday to be resurrected. Those who don't know, Doomsday just becomes immune to whatever killed him the last time he died. So Darkseid was then unable to do anything to Doomsday, right? So they're not the catch-all weapon, but against soldiers in Orion's army, they're going to do some major damage, right? So the slaughter is just becoming completely one-sided. It's just carnage out there. Orion decides that enough is enough, and he's going to engage his foster dad head on. That is a fruitless endeavor. Darkseid is able to do exactly what Ororo did to him earlier, and just trigger him into basically kicking his own butt. All right. just taunt him about his family and his friends, and then taunt him about the possibility that Ororo just lied and is never coming back, right? And that everything's over and he should just give up. And because of all of that going on while he is fighting, Orion is overwhelmed. I would probably make it clear that it was necessary for Darkseid to do that. I don't necessarily like my villain being so completely and totally overpowered that the guy who was prophesied to kill him can't beat him in a fight. Right? That sounds kind of silly. So I think Darkseid needed to do that, especially with how strong he had become because of how angry he was. Right? He wasn't holding anything back. So although I will make it Orion's fault and embarrassing for him, I will also make it clear that Darkseid had to do it. Maybe Darkseid will taunt him with it when the battle is so securely on Darkseid's side that he knows he can't win anymore. It's like, yeah, you could have whooped my ass, but you were so stupid, you were so cocky, you were so angry, you flubbed it. But anyway, as Darkseid is coming in for the finishing blow, Storm will intercept. So I'm going to have Darkseid assume that Ororo is Themysciran. I don't really know what other group of people she could possibly be. Maybe from the Fourth World, but again, he would know that she wasn't. So assume that she's Themysciran and insult her and her people, quote unquote, right? And then just go on with the Omega Beams to try to obliterate her, right? But to the surprise of nobody who's watching the video, but just fun for the story, Storm will summon Mjolnir, which she has gained. For those who are unaware, Storm is capable of wielding Mjolnir, and she will combine its strength with her own natural thunder abilities to be able to overpower the Omega Beams. The energy will quickly overload into Darkseid's face and explode, and his eyes will just blow right out of their sockets like he's like in Scanners. It's just like boom, right? For those who don't know, fun movie called Scanners. If you are squeamish or do not like gore, do not look it up. If you like watching people's heads blow up, look up Scanners. So he's gonna scream just like like a hellish reel in pain, and then he's gonna teleport away embarrassed. Right, he's crucially injured. Right. Storm then reckons that even the new gods should fear the might of the old. Right, and then she just obliterates the rest of the apocalyptic forces that haven't fled with Darkseid. Right. So Orion is saved. The day is saved, but we still have a Granny Goodness to catch. So I want somebody to capture Granny Goodness and bring it in. I don't want it to be Storm or Orion. I'm trying to figure out who that is, and I think I'm going to make that character Kyle Rayner. I'm going to have the life entity drawn in because life from outside of the source wall has appeared. And you'll see why in my later plots for this series. That I think that would make the most sense. Maybe Metron and Kyle Rayner have met before. Maybe Metron summons his help. Maybe that's how he gets in. I don't know. I'm thinking it's going to be Kyle Rayner, though, the more I think about it. For those who are unaware, Kyle Rayner was the Green Lantern of the 1990s. Hal Jordan became a villain known as Parallax. This has been retconned into an evil creature that makes you do bad things called Parallax. I do agree that his conversion to Parallax is a little, I don't know, it's a little wonky. It gets a little too serious, a little too quickly. But I'm also a big fan of making people accountable for their actions in comics. Uh, so I'm having half on that retcon. Anyway, Kyle Rayner became the Green Lantern after Hal Jordan became a villain. He was. Well, he didn't really defeat Hal Jordan. Hal Jordan sacrificed himself, but he was able to redeem Hal Jordan. He was the Green Lantern for a very long time, and then they decided to bring everybody back. He became a Green Lantern again. He himself was possessed by Parallax, and then he eventually became the White Lantern, the host of the life entity. In the DC universe, there are different lights that represent different spectrums of what's called the emotional spectrum, or different elements of the emotional spectrum. The Green Lantern ring is one of those lights. The white is for the life embodiment itself, just rebirth, rejuvenation, stuff like that. So it is the greatest of the ones that you can see. I've heard that there are ones you can't see now. I didn't read that far into it because comics just became too expensive. But I believe it, and I'm sure they're just as strong as the white ones or whatever. Uh, I can't talk about it, so I don't want to speculate. But yeah. Anyway, point is, Kyle Rayner's supposed to be an exceptionally strong Lantern, right? So I'll bring him in to capture Granny Goodness, especially to help out with the later stuff in the story. Anyway, Kyle Rayner is captured by Granny Goodness. Oh yeah, we can have the astronaut person. I completely forgot I wrote this down. The astronaut who was guiding Storm around earlier. I'm going to have that be Metron himself. So there you go. All right. And Metron will help capture Granny Goodness as well. They find the antidote that she makes. She offers to make one for them. And just like I said earlier, they all say, no, we know better. We know what you're trying to do. All right. So they find the antidote and they cure the king and the queen. Orion thanks Storm for her help and wishes her well, assuming that she's going to leave. Orion takes off his helmet as a sign of respect before he wishes her well. I should tell you that, by the way. Ororo tells Orion she isn't going anywhere. Darkseid isn't dead. His army's lurking about, and other villainous gods are plotting revenge. Besides, she needs to whip him into shape, right? Highfather, who has just recovered, heartily agrees. Excuse me there, guys. Orion asks how long she'll stay. She says until she wants to go home. This time away has done a lot for her. Maybe she'll never go home. Then they have a nice little laugh. And that's the end of the main story. But we have one more thing to touch upon. We got to meet up back with Galactus, right? He comes to the edge of the Marvel multiverse. He's fiending for the energy from the boom tubes and the source wall. The power cosmic craves it. If he can feast upon the corpses of old gods, he can attain a power beyond comprehension. Maybe, just maybe, his eternal hunger can be satiated by the corpses of older gods, right? For those who are unaware, Galactus was originally a scientist, a man named Galan. I don't know. He's an alien, right? From a planet that I assume is pronounced Ta. That's where I assume Galactus comes from. Galen Ta, right? Um, Anyway, Galactus was trying to, in the vein of a similar DC character, speaking of the Green Lantern Corps, they're led by a group called the Guardians of the Universe. They are an immortal little group of Smurf looking guys. And one of their own was a villain named Krona, and Krona attempted to do the same thing that Galen did, which is to witness the Big Bang and the rebirth of their universes. Right? And Galactus when he witnessed the rebirth of his universe, he was imbued with a power called the power cosmic, and the power cosmic is the thing that makes Galactus hungry, right? It forces him to go out and feast upon the world. The power cosmic is one of the many forces of rebirth in the Marvel universe. For Dragon Ball fans, Beerus the Destroyer, you know how he goes around and just blows planets up, right? And he does that to help keep balance with the Supreme Kai, who can bring planets back. All right. Galactus is a similar shtick. He destroys so that new life may be born in its place. He doesn't destroy out of malice, usually, and he does not feel anything about what he does. He simply has to do it. All right, but Galactus is thinking that maybe the power cosmic will be satiated with the source wall, and he can return to his former life as Galen or Galen or whatever it is, right? And actually rid himself of this curse, really, that's been put on him, right? So that's what the note we're going to end it on, right? And with that being done, I thank you all for your time. I'm going to take just a little bit more of it to pitch my two other ideas, but they're both on one slide. Hopefully, it won't be half as long of a conversation as this one was. Okay, so I've got two more plans for where this would hypothetically go if this went anywhere, which it won't, and I'm not expecting it to. Please don't take it that way. This is just for fun. Hey, this is where I would take the story. So Galactus feasts on the source wall and becomes stronger from the old god's energy there, but his hunger grows as well, and he comes to New Genesis to feast on New Genesis and Apocalypse because there are living gods there who he believes will feed his hunger greater than the dead gods at the source wall. All right. The forces of New Genesis, Apocalypse, Orion, a grievously wounded but still living Darkseid, and Thor / Mjolnir, whatever you want to call her, Storm, all unite against this force against Galactus, and they're pretty much completely and totally useless against him. Galactus is able to effortlessly defeat those who attack him, and he begins to feast on the corpses of the gods that he recently slain. He even eats one of them while they are alive. Right? And he's getting stronger, but he's getting hungrier, and he can't stop himself, and he just begins to feast and feast and feast. Right? Darkseid eventually is forced to reluctantly sacrifice himself. He is crushed under the might of Galactus, and when he dies, Orion begrudgingly takes in the Omega Force, which is the energy that Darkseid possesses, to himself. And because he is motivated by something beyond the normal boundaries of Darkseid's abilities, because he wants death for death's purpose. Darkseid wants the anti-life equation, which strips you of individuality and of the purpose of life itself, so that he can enslave basically all of reality under his will and cause them instant death if they ever come against him, right? That's his ultimate purpose, usually, in comics, right? But he can never attain it, and part of why I believe he can never attain it is because he does not wish to use death as death's purpose, right? He doesn't want to take lives that are for taking, to respect the boundary of life and death, and take those that are, it's their time. He wants to use it willy-nilly and whatever, right? But Galactus has already defied death several times. Death would be forever in pursuit of Galactus for what happened with the Big Bang. Things like that, right? An event that no mortal should have been able to survive. One that completely transcends the boundaries of reality. right? So like a final destination sort of thing, death. And it could be Marvel's death or DC's death, or maybe both of them will appear to, yeah, why not both of them? Will appear to Orion, and using the Omega energy, Orion will become King Omega, which is like Darkseid's champion, the holder of the Omega Force, and he will be granted the anti-life equation by the deaths. Okay? And then he will use the anti-life equation to kill Galactus. Right? But at that point, King Omega becomes the dominant personality of Orion, right? I may put Orion taking Highfather's place in the story first. Yeah, probably will. Just make him king of New Genesis, and then unfortunately, the king of New Genesis is now one with Darkseid, right? His immortal essence has infected and corrupted him, but there's nothing that can be done about it, and he did use it to save everybody, so begrudgingly and cautiously, the people of New Genesis accept King Omega as their leader. Right. And then for part 2, I'm going to have the Omega Force basically driving Darkseid Orion Cuckoo Gaga, right? Darkseid's personality is just seeping in more and more. Darkseid is going to force Orion into a BPD, that's a borderline personality disorder, for those who are unaware, like situation where Orion just flips on a dime. He goes from his usual gruff but kind-hearted and well-meaning self to just this absolute monster, the sadistic freak. Like, people that are innocent, that do not deserve any sort of reprimanding or punishment, will be punished by King Omega just because. Right? And then other times he will just go help people. It'll be so chaotic and willy-nilly and scary that the forces of New Genesis won't know what to do. And the forces of Apocalypse will start to realize that Darkseid is winning the personality war over the two of them. All right. Kyle Rayner has decided to stay in New Genesis as well, because Kyle Rayner and Storm are basically the bulwark against what is going on. All right. So Darkseid is going to be, King Omega is going to be kidnapped by Calabac and brought to Apocalypse, where the new gods of Apocalypse are going to use their technology and their just malice and will and stuff to bring Darkseid to the dominant personality of Orion. It'll be like when Darkseid controlled Dan Turpin in Final Crisis, for those of you who have read that. And King Omega will then declare that New Genesis is a null state and that it belongs to Apocalypse, right? And he will attack the forces of New Genesis. With the armies of Apocalypse, and those who have been around him on New Genesis will be corrupted by him and will join him as well. So their army will be even greater, right? Except for Kyle and Storm. Storm will take command of New Genesis at this point because she has proven herself capable of doing so. But she will be inspired by two things that have happened recently to go back to her home universe one more time to look for something. While she was dealing with King Omega and what was going on with him, she was reminded a lot of Jean Grey and what happened with Phoenix, and how Jean couldn't control herself, and Kyle Rayner's conversation about how his ring works and the life entity and what it does in the universe also reminds Ororo of the Phoenix, because the Phoenix does a similar thing. It is a rebirth entity, again, through destruction, but such is the Phoenix, right? Through the ashes comes rebirth, right? So Ororo, who, for those who are unaware, has controlled the Phoenix entity before, or bonded with the Phoenix entity before as well. will convince the Phoenix entity to help her because she is defending the sanctity of life in the entire DC universe. King Omega, Darkseid, is using all of the energy that he has. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot to mention this. King Omega absorbed the power cosmic in the last fight after Galactus was slain. So he has that ability as well. So King Omega is just like making realms of death and destruction. So the Phoenix wants to help, right? So they come to the Marvel or from the Marvel universe to the DC universe again, right? And Phoenix, Mjolnir, Storm, and Kyle Rayner battle King Omega, and they're trounced for a little while, but Kyle ends up surrendering the life entity to Storm as well because it resonates so well with the Phoenix entity. They are essentially the same thing, and he thinks their powers unified will be greater than separate but coordinated. He is proven correct. Our new, whatever the heck you want to call this thing, like White Lantern, Phoenix, Mjolnir, Storm, I guess, easily defeats King Omega. To jump back to Dragon Ball real quick, I'm thinking like Gogeta and Janemba, right? Where basically throws a ball at him and he blows up, right? And when King Omega is defeated and the Omega Force and the power cosmic are removed from it, the life entity from the White Lantern and the Phoenix Force engulf the Omega Force, and they just purify it, just like boom, just dissolve it into atoms, right? And Darkseid's soul is heard like screaming and retching in pain as it's just completely obliterated. The Phoenix and the White Lantern then part ways, go back to their own respective homes, but the Phoenix Force uses Ororo's power to open a hole in the source wall very briefly so that they can both return, right? Ororo senses that it's time for her to leave since the Phoenix basically showed her. And she basically says good farewells to everybody, wishes everybody the best, tells Orion to keep his chin up and not let what happened get the better of him, right? Tells him that he'll be a good king, she can tell, right? And he thanks her, all the other gods thank them as well. Kyle Rayner and Storm are parted well as well, it's just a nice happy farewell before she flies through the storm or the source wall and is returned to her home as well. Yeah, and with that, thanks very much for listening. I appreciate you putting up with me spitballing here. The Kyle Rayner thing just kind of clicked at that point and really fed in kind of well there. So, thank you for uh, being the source of inspiration for that without even technically being present. I appreciate it. Like and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Thanks for your time again. If you like Marvel or DC or any of the properties that I brought up, please leave a comment below talking about it. Let me know what you think of the story. Do you have any ideas like that you'd like to share too? With these crossovers are really doing numbers for both of the companies, so I think they're going to be around for a little bit, and I think there are a lot of great characters that could come together. Green Arrow, Daredevil would just be wonderful. I would love to see that. I would love to see Etrigan and Venom, although with the fire that might be a little difficult, but I still think it'd be cool. Both of those characters are coded in the same way despite not having powers or even background similarities. I feel a lot of things could work well with the two of them. Anyway, if you have any ideas like that, let me know in the comments, please. I'd love to hear them. As you can tell by this rant, I am a big, big, big comic book nerd. Both traditional American comic books and manga and the likes. I've read a couple. One Piece is really a big one. I've got a video about One Piece that's coming out actually at the same time that this video is. So if you're a fan, check that out. If you have the time and you feel so inclined, I'd greatly appreciate it. Just to get it out of the way again, I don't own Marvel Comics, DC Comics, Disney, Warner Brothers, any of the things that fit under their banners. I don't own them. They're not mine. They belong to them. All rights to those people. Please don't mistake me. None of these characters are mine. This is just a fun idea that I had for fun. I am not trying to make a profit off of it. Just pitching it to the greater internet community to see what they think about it. With that being said, I appreciate your time. Once again, all rights to the respective owners. The page underneath this one is a source for both the comic that the images come from and the source that I obtained the images from. All credit goes to them as well, especially to the artists and the writers of these stories. They have sometimes some peculiar and even funny origins to them, but they were made with a lot of heart and a lot of love and a lot of dedication, and the people behind them deserve all the credit in the world for that. So anyway, thanks again for your time. Have a wonderful week. I'm going to see y'all in the next one. Bye. Hey, it's me again, real quick. I just wanted to bring up very quickly, as noted by me mentioning the Superman and Spider-Man comics earlier, I do still buy comics every once in a while on occasion. Um, I just don't get them weekly or monthly, even like I used to. I noticed that there was a little bit of a contradiction in my earlier statements, where I said, check out those Superman Spider-Man comics, and then later said, I used to buy comics when I could afford them, or something to that effect. Right? And what I meant to say was, I used to buy comics all the time. Now it's just once in a blue moon, like with these Superman Spider-Man comics, which who knows if they'll ever do another one of those. So yeah, I picked those up. Anyway, that's it. Have a great night. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Let your family know you love them. Have a great one.